Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Tucson Humanities Festival. My name is Alain-Philippe Durand, and I'm the Dean of the College of Humanities. Thank you for joining us. My esteemed colleagues have prepared these presentations to challenge and inform us, and perhaps help us seek better solutions to the problems we face in the world today. Now, please enjoy this presentation and visit our website, humanitiesfestival.arizona.edu, for the complete event schedule, as well as recordings of this event and future events. The 2020 Tucson Humanities Festival is supported by the Humanities Seminars program. The program offers premier adult education by top university professors from its home here in the College of Humanities.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Jan Chrisman. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Public and Applied Humanities at the University of Arizona. I'm going to share with you an example of how humanities research can bring about spatial justice. That's me there, making a funny face with a group of my collaborators in Little Tokyo, Los Angeles. So first of all, you might be asking, spatial justice? What's that? Spatial justice is an idea perhaps most beautifully described by geographer Ed Soja as the fair distribution in space of socially valued resources and opportunities to use them. Food deserts are a clear example of spatial injustice. These are areas like parts of South Los Angeles, which you can see here, which lack access to healthy food, forcing people to pay high prices for low-quality food at places like liquor stores. One of the most complex and pressing issues today is the variety of processes and forces that are typically all lumped together under the catch-all term gentrification. Gentrification can price people out of their homes, out of their businesses, and even out of their communities. I'm going to share how I've been using my humanities skills and knowledge to work with the community of Little Tokyo in their fight against gentrification. Little Tokyo is one of 3 remaining official Japantowns in the US, and it's been a thriving Japanese-American community since the 1800s. One thing you should know about Little Tokyo is that it has faced extraordinary challenges over the years. In addition to racial discrimination and having land stolen by the city of LA, the entire community was uprooted during World War II and imprisoned in remote internment camps. My research has explored the role that culture has played in building such a strong, resilient community like Little Tokyo that has withstood these challenges and even thrived after bouncing back from them. I'm going to show you one of my favorite images. It shows the first Nisei Week festival after World War II in 1949 with pageant queen Terry Hakoda. This is astonishing. It's an amazing image because despite the unimaginable discrimination that took place only a few years earlier, the community still has this very public display of their unique cultural identity. Neither Japanese nor white American, but Japanese American. Little Tokyo goes on to become a hotbed of a distinct culture-based activism. The first Asian American media arts organization, Visual Communications, is born out of Little Tokyo. The first Asian American, and in fact first theater organization of color of any kind in the US, East West Players, locates in Little Tokyo. This is just among many others. Community leaders and activists bridge across generations, across ethnic groups, and across political issues using the arts. Little Tokyo is determined to never let what happened during World War II ever happen again to their community or anywhere else for that matter. Today, returning to the issue of spatial justice, Little Tokyo is facing some of the most intense pressures of gentrification that once again threaten its place in the city. It's nestled between the historic core and the arts district, two of the hottest real estate areas in LA. Much of the research on gentrification has implicated the arts as a key driver in this process, as artists move to communities, bring cultural cachet, which turns into an influx of capital, and ultimately the community is pushed out. My work in Little Tokyo, however, has pointed toward an incredible inversion of this process. The rich history of arts, culture, and activism in the community has led to the use of arts-based activism to fight gentrification. The community coalition Sustainable Little Tokyo has used arts as a means of community organizing, drawing in a wider array of stakeholders than they might otherwise, and building political power to make a claim to their place in the city. I was able to contribute my historical, critical, curatorial, and exhibition skills to put together an art show on the history of arts activism in Little Tokyo, which served as an important reminder to the public that this community was not about to be pushed aside. This exhibition also served as the backdrop to a pop-up community space called Arts at 341 on the historic First Street North, where dozens of art events brought in people who shared art, learned about the issues that their community was facing, and signed up to march, rally, and petition the government for their place in the city. The Sustainable Little Tokyo initiative has fought for the community's right to have a say in how the city of Los Angeles will develop 3 major parcels of publicly owned land that are right in the heart of Little Tokyo. The work continues. The next collaborative project that I am helping with draws from the curious history of architect Charles Moore, who used a then novel live broadcasting technology in the 1970s to solicit public participation in a community development and design process. And we're trying to do something similar in Little Tokyo. We're going to stage a 2-month-long event called Revision TV, where we will have live broadcasts of a huge 3D model of Little Tokyo, which will be piped into TV in the Little Tokyo Towers, the largest housing development in Little Tokyo and the home to hundreds of low-income seniors. These important community members will be able to call in and request live changes to the model so that they can see their vision turn into reality in real time. And that's how we're going to continue to fight for spatial justice in Little Tokyo, getting feedback from the public and giving this feedback to the local government. This is all with the help of the humanities from the University of Arizona. To read more, go to tinyurl.com/protectingibasho. Thanks.
Ancient Greece and Rome were part of the greater ancient Mediterranean, a world that was rich in its multiculturalism, as reflected in the diversity of these famed portraits from Rome and Egypt. But images like these may not be the first to pop into mind when you think of the so-called classical world, that is to say, the world of Greco-Roman antiquity. Instead, you might think of something more like one of these, the Apollo Belvedere, the Venus de Milo. These and similar works have been handed down to us as iconic of the classical world. Pure marble altered only by a chisel that shapes it into perfection. What they actually began as is something more like this, but the paint that was originally on those statues has worn off over the millennia. And this can foster a misconception of the classical world as pristine, on a pedestal, lofty, inaccessible. It can be difficult to think of the image on the right as classical when what remains of Greco-Roman antiquity and what is perpetuated as classical is more like the one on the left. What this leaves us with is a distorted and manipulated view of antiquity as pure and unadulterated, a view that ultimately serves whiteness. Part of the legacy of this distorted view is that non-white people are often assumed to be inherently disinterested in and distant from the world of ancient Greece and Rome. It is hard for the layperson to see that the image on the right is just as much a product of the so-called classical world as the one on the left. Hence, the diversity problem in classics, which the field has grown increasingly cognizant of in recent years. As you can see, a simple Google search for diversifying classics turns up a number of recent efforts toward this end in academia and beyond. But while many classicists are intuitively aware of the diversity problem, actual data on diversity in classics is limited. The Society for Classical Studies does try to collect demographic data, but they run into various problems which leave their data lacunose and spotty. And what data they do manage to collect is presented like this. You will probably guess correctly that this presentation does not bring out the full implications of the data, and it does not exactly inspire immediate data-driven action. Our current pandemic moment has everyone cognizant of the absolute necessity of data. When it comes to a global epidemic, the quantity and quality of the relevant data can have literally life or death consequences. But it's likely that something like this doesn't fully drive home what is going on, as something like this does. These visualizations help us understand the data more deeply. Data, when presented in a way that fosters deep understanding of it, informs individual decisions along with crucial public health policy. A few years ago, my concerns about diversity in classics led me to join forces with the University of Arizona's Center for Digital Humanities to come up with a way to address the issue specifically through the angle of data, both the collection of it and also its visualization. I came up with a survey to distribute to classics faculty and students nationwide, and the CDH team designed and programmed a website that would generate a number of visualizations in real time. While the survey was running, the data visualizations were dynamic, constantly changing as new data came in. Thanks to our joint efforts, we were able to confirm, even from a limited data set, that classics is overwhelmingly white. The paler shades of red on this map are supposed to indicate lower percentages of white identifying survey respondents. You can see that most of the states are pretty dark red. The CDH team also generated a heat map detailing the degree of diversity by state, based on how high a percentage of the overall respondents the people from the most prevalent racial group comprised. The paler shades indicate less diversity. You can see that most of the states are pretty pale. And we also asked respondents to rate their overall satisfaction with the level of diversity in classics. The inner circle differentiates faculty from students, the middle circle shows further differentiation within those groups, and the outermost circle indicates how satisfied with diversity each group was. So that's the data, but it is worth asking, why do or should we care about diversity? For me, there are obvious ethical obligations we have to diversify classics. We should do all we can to provide access to whoever wants it. But classics as a field also stands to benefit from diversity. Diversity among scholars can produce new knowledge and sometimes even corrective knowledge. My example comes from the work of Dr. Shelley Haley, the first Black woman to be president of the Society for Classical Studies, a self-proclaimed Black feminist scholar whom I am honored to call a friend. One of the many things that she has written as a Black feminist scholar pointed out the biases that had appeared in previous scholarship not by Black women. What I am showing you here is the description from a Latin poem of a character who is an African woman. Dr. Haley's unique perspective as a Black woman in classics allowed her to correct the racial and gender-based biases of previous scholarship, an example of how diversity can produce new and corrective insights about Greco-Roman antiquity. So what I have tried to do with this talk is show efforts I have taken to increase understanding of diversity in classics, as well as the kinds of things we can achieve if we truly and collectively take up the task of diversifying classics. Thank you.
The age of hashtag activism is an evolution of and a testament to how multimedia, social media, and the power of interactive technologies have become an integral part of the social justice movement. Multimedia in the form of powerful images at the turn of the 20th century helped shape the minds of many who believed in a negatively monolithic view of African Americans. The photography of W.E.B. Du Bois at the Paris exhibition in 1900 to the moving images of James Van Der Zee, who through his work told an inspiring story of the Harlem Renaissance, to Gordon Parks and others who documented the civil rights movement in ways that told the world that all was not rosy in the United States. Filmmaker Oscar Micheaux, who countered D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation and other race films, set the stage for black filmmakers to create films that spoke to periods of racial unrest here in the United States. News reporters, the black press, those soldiers without swords showed the world the pain of a community that mourned the death of Emmett Till in 55, the fear and horror surrounding the Little Rock Nine in 57, the violence of white supremacists during the civil rights movement of the 60s. You pick your event: police dogs, high-pressure water hoses, a tank for God's sakes, freedom rides, and so on and so on. The filmmakers of the 1960s and 70s created a genre that spoke to the people of a community in a language often misunderstood by those who were outside of that community. Afrofuturism incorporates an element of social justice embedded into the evolving definitions of the term. And with citizen journalism fast-forwarding us to the era of modern cell phones, social media, live streaming, and digital technologies, we have an entire generation making use of these tools to express their understandings of the effects of racism on their personal lives as well as here in America. Now, what this does is it takes social justice to an entirely new level. We're already seeing the explosion of creative means by which young people are using digital tools to create multimedia projects demonstrating their interaction with social justice, with racial injustice, including multimedia forms like augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, volumetric video projection, and this is just the tip of the realm of possibilities. We've already seen augmented installments attached to street art, related to the Black Lives Matter movement in exhibitions located around the world. Virtual reality projects immersing users into the shoes of underrepresented groups so that the effects of racism can be experienced in ways never before possible. Today, we're seeing a rise in the number of video games designed for children in order to help them understand the negative effects of racism on them and everyone in the community. The movement, meant to move people to action, must be multimedia, multisensory, multimodal, and an experience never to be forgotten.